I want to go to my guest though, because I want to really get into this and get into what is taking place on the ground. Johnny Miller,
Jamal,
welcome
how
to
are
the
you?
show, my man. How you doing? You doing okay today?
Doing okay, yeah. It's a holiday today in Russia, so I've
It
decided
is.
to stop the work for the day and
I
take a
am very
holiday. Except for
jealous
this interview,
of
of
you
course.
right now. Um, are you going to go to the Victory Day celebrations?
Yeah, I probably will. I mean, I've actually been the last 2 years, so it's not all that exciting for me. That sounds funny, but but it goes right by my house, so
Does
and I'm not
it?
doing any work. I'm not doing any work for it. Nobody's paying me to do any work for it. So, but I'll probably get bored and go along and write a piece about it anyway. So, um,
Yeah, I guess it's not exciting for you. It's exciting for me every year.
yeah.
My understanding of the world, the thing that got me into politics and
Have you been
history and stuff
before?
like that was the wars. It was the wars and going through one war after the next, World War II, World War One, and then some of the Napoleonic War. Like that was my context. So when I see events like this, I get excited. And for me, it is such a loss that it is not celebrated world over, considering it was the world that beat back the Nazis with the Russians or the Soviet Union, taking the brunt of that to the tune of like 80% of the Nazis that were killed on the Eastern Front. Just for the audience to know, Johnny Miller is a British journalist based in Moscow, spending much of the Ukraine war based and reporting from the Donbass region. Thank you for joining me, man. I really do appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Oh man, I want to start at something that was put out. Like I always say, social media is not news, and if I can't confirm it, I don't run with it because it's social media. People say all sorts of things. But one of the things that came out, Ukraine has been tossing a lot of drones and attacks in the air. In fact, one of the attacks that they recently put out were 500 drones or more that was swarming, not to mention HIMARS missiles. There was, I think it was another missile system, Neptune, that was effectively fired at Russia. And all of this is taking place as people are coming in. Lula, Xi Jinping, Vucic was there on that particular picture. There was, I'm going to call it a rumor, but there was talk about the Oreshnik being threatened over Kiev, effectively saying that the Ministry of Defense was looking at targets in Kiev and warned that if any attack happens on Victory Day that is aimed at the parades and the celebrations during the truce, that there will be hell to pay and that the Reznik is online for potential part of that hell to be paid. Is that true? Was that something that was released out in the Russian media sphere?
I think it was, yeah. I mean, I was having coffee with a friend near Red Square yesterday, and there were loud explosions coming up from where the Kremlin was, only about a 5-minute walk away. So the whole street sort of looked up nervously, all thinking the same thing. Is this some kind of attack? But I don't know what it was. Maybe just something fell off a building, or maybe blank artillery fire for the parade. I don't know. But there's clearly a nervousness. Um, Not a huge no. I don't know if it'll scare anybody off going. I mean, maybe some people might think, oh, maybe I won't bring my kids or something. But so I don't think there's too much fear. And obviously, Moscow's a big city. The parade goes right around the center. But certainly there was reports of 5 drones. The mayor of Moscow said
Oh, come back to me.
shot down
There we
yesterday, which is
go.
not a major event. That seems to happen. The first time the drone attacks happened in Moscow, I went to see them, and it was just a drone had flown through a window in an apartment block on the outskirts of Moscow, and all the people in the building were just annoyed that they had to evacuate to go back. So a lot of these attacks aren't really very big; they're more for show than anything else.
Yeah.
So, will something happen? I doubt that Ukraine will try to attack Red Square. I can't. I mean, when you've got the leader of China there, leader of other countries, they're way up. Is this a wise thing to do? And, if you
Well, Zelensky is
attack an area in
threatened.
which world leaders are.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm sorry. There was a lag.
Yeah,
That was
no, I mean you're absolutely right, and there is a chance. I mean, the Ukrainians have done so many crazy things in this conflict that there is a chance. Will they try to attack the outskirts of Moscow? That's more of a possibility. Well, we threatened it and we did it. Or there'll be attacks somewhere else in Russia. I suspect that'll probably happen, but they happen quite regularly. So I suspect Ukraine will do something just to say, we told, we said we'd do something and we did. But attacking the actual Red Square, I'd be surprised. And as you say, Russians have warned that if there is something like that, they will take it. They will use Oreshniks in Kiev, and I can see that happening. They will do that if there is a
Oh, so
major
that
attack.
is true. That wasn't a rumor.
I've seen
That
that
is
report
true.
as well. I've seen that report as well. And if it wasn't Russian government, it would have been some Russian influential people, politicians, basically putting out that veiled threat. There's a lot of threats on both sides and a lot of tick for tack. So a few weeks ago, Ukrainians killed a Russian drone designer I think it was the east of Russia. There's many assassinations.
Right.
And so obviously drones are becoming the most important thing in this war, one of the most important thing in the designing of drones. So the Ukrainians killed a Russian drone designer in Russia. And then 2 days ago, we had the news that a Ukrainian drone designer was assassinated in Kiev. So it's tit for tat. You do this, you do that. So when I was in Donetsk, if the Russians hit an administration building in Ukraine, the next day Ukraine would hit an administration building around the corner from me in Donetsk, and the other way around. It's tit for tat, and it's that escalation as well. And that's the only reason we haven't had nuclear weapons used, because there's that fear of that escalation. And so Ukraine would be weighing up what's in it for us attacking Red Square. Okay, it's a propaganda victory somehow, if they were to do it. What's the cons? The cons are destroying our reputations with China, Brazil, all the rest of it, and massive Russian retaliation on Kiev. It looks like they've threatened. So they kind of weigh these things up. That's why it doesn't seem to be in Ukrainian interest to attack Red Square. But you never know. They've done some crazy things, and it's NATO still that's really controlling them a lot of the time, most of the time. So what will they want? But it's going to be an interesting day tomorrow. Hopefully it doesn't pass off with too much trouble.
Yeah, I'm so jealous. I would love to see that parade.
Have you never been?
How it's like. I mean, I guess my thing is, it bothers me that Europe and even the U.S. doesn't acknowledge this kind of sacred sacrifice that was made by the Soviets. And I could understand why Russia would have a parade of this scale, especially now when they're trying to make this point about, look, we are pushing back against Nazism. You guys are backing Banderites in Ukraine in order to come after us. Okay, well, we need to restate this message. And the parade and the celebrations on some level do that, especially the Chinese contingent, Russian contingent, all of these groups that are there. What defensive plans are they using? I saw that they were putting air defense on buildings, all throughout Moscow.
I don't know if it's all throughout Moscow. I'm going to have a walk actually to the center after this interview, so I'll see if I see anything. But there are air defense buildings on buildings, I think. Yeah. There will be. The Russians will take these threats very, very, very seriously. And of course, the Chinese president, the Brazilian president, they would have done risk assessments as well. They would have decided, okay, and talked to the. So, but yeah, there's a lot of anti-air defense. Ukraine has been striking Moscow for a long time now. You don't really hear about it or see it. I mean, when there's a drone attack in Moscow, it might make big news, but the vast majority of Moscow won't have even heard of it. So Nobody's sort of scared. It feels like a peaceful city, Moscow. But there will be air defense, absolutely, and there'll certainly be a lot more preparations for this event, absolutely.
It is wild to me, and maybe even to many Americans, that it's like, yeah, a drone went through a window and people were annoyed. If that was America, oh, they would lose their minds. Like the notion that a foreign country is attacking us, I don't think the perspective would be, oh, this is aggravating. Let me go get a coffee. I don't think, I really don't think that's the way we would look at it, but that is the way they
Well, it
look
is.
at it there.
You adapt very quickly. In Donetsk, which is the front line of the war zone for 8 years, really, and it's particularly since 2022, and the artillery is on the edge of the city, Ukrainian artillery, and there half the city left because of the bombing. But I was there for a long time,
Yeah.
and you'd go to, there'd be strikes in the center quite a lot. People had to get on. People have to get on with their day. So it was actually a journalist friend's birthday in the center of Donetsk, at a kebab place, and so I walked there, about half an hour walk from my apartment, and I heard a central bus station, being hit by artillery. And so I thought I'd pop by there first, because a lot of the time you go to where the strike happens and there's no dead. It's just landed in the middle of the street. There's no story. Other times you go there, there's this bus station, and there's dead bodies lying on the ground, civilians, burnt out bus, horrible sight. So I did a quick news report. And then over the road, there'll still be people waiting for their bus. So there's bodies in the street from one attack. Other people waiting for their bus because you just have to go. And, I go to the restaurant, it's like 10-minute walk away from where the strike just happened. And I said to the other journalists, they asked me where I was, and I said the bus station got hit, 2, 3 dead. And they just shrugged, because it's not really a story. If there's a dozen dead, that's a story that will go big in the news. But 2 dead, no, it doesn't. Only that makes the Telegram channels in Donetsk. That's nothing. So, my point is, you get used to it.
Yeah.
So the first time that Moscow was hit by drones, I said on the edge of the city, it was big international news. But as I said, like, even the people with the apartment block hit, because it was just a drone went through the one window. This isn't. So, but then people just get used to it. And I say the vast majority of Moscow have never even heard a drone hit, because it's such a big city. But
That is amazing.
people adapt. Tomorrow, if your city in America starts, I don't know, getting bombed or whatever, you'll be shocked to start with. But people adapt pretty quickly.
Mm-hmm. And they have to go on with their day. They still need to go to work. They still need to pay for their kids, their house, the car.
Yeah.
It's like life just goes on. Wow, that is amazing. That is really amazing. And you said the parade goes by your house. And a separate question. What is your take on the way Europe is dealing with this? Like, I don't know. From my point of view, this is sacred. Just from the expensive blood, the number of countries that got together, the Soviet Union, the US, Russia, France, all of these countries kind of joined hands to push back on Nazism, China. And now Europe has taken a completely different tact on this and wouldn't allow many of the people to even go to Moscow to celebrate the parade. Give me your take on it. I mean, I know how I feel about it.
Yeah, they're acting like children. I think there's other ceremonies as well between Russian and British people, for example, who celebrate together. I'm in touch with people in America, and there'll be many people in Britain and Europe and America who have great respect for the alliance in the Second World War, particularly some military people and others. So I know there'll be a lot of people who would, like yourself, want to be here and celebrate, that alliance that defeated Nazism. But the politicians are acting like children. I just saw on X, Fico, the Slovakian president. He's in Europe because a lot of Slovakia is quite pro-Russian or sympathetic to Russia.
Right.
And to get to Russia, Slovakia is in Eastern Europe, of course. It's probably a 1.5-hour flight, maybe a 2-hour flight to Moscow, I think, maybe. To get to Russia, he couldn't fly over EU countries. They closed all the. So he originally flew up, I think, to Northern Europe, but they closed the border there. Then he had to fly down to Turkey, all the way down across the Mediterranean. So he's going towards America, up around Britain, up around Norway, and then down into Moscow. And you just think, what are you doing? Like, you children.
Yeah.
This is a European country with a president and a lot of the population who are sympathetic to Russia because that's their, heritage. And you're making them fly all the way around. I mean, it's just pathetic, to be honest with you. And it's done to try and scare off anybody in Europe having sympathy with the Russians or Russian position. So even celebrating the end of war in Europe, they try to make that difficult because they want to close down anybody who tries to promote good relations between Europe and Russia. They try to shut down. They'll try to ruin your career. They'll threaten to kill you in some circumstances. They'll do everything to stop a friendship between Europe and Russia. And that's the thing that really, these European and British elites and politicians, they're not patriots.
No.
They are people who are serving interests, wealthy elites. They're not patriots. They're not acting in British or European interests. You're German. They're effectively deindustrializing by shutting themselves off from Russian energy. For what? It doesn't make any sense. And these people are not patriots.
When you're doing a story in Donbass, what do? You release it on your channel? Is that how that works? Or you release it in a newspaper, an article?
So when I was in Donbass, I was working for Press TV, which is still doing stories for Press TV, which is a Middle Eastern broadcaster.
Okay.
And then just publishing on X. I have a big following on X, been on Telegram.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just do a collection of news reports. And it's usually my posts on X. I write stories on X, photographs, videos, that kind of stuff. So a lot of that work went big. And yeah, now Moscow, I just, I started a new show, actually, Press TV show, but then I just sometimes try to do some stories, but it's not easy doing stories in Russia. I have all these story ideas, but it's difficult finding funding in Russia.
Oh, I see. I see. From the standpoint of these attacks that are taking place, are these attacks? I'm very curious on what the media space in Russia is like when they're seeing 500 drone strikes as foreign leaders are coming into the country. Like when Lula was coming into the country, there were drones and missiles being fired. And to go further, HIMARS can't be fired without U.S. support. So the U.S. is still supporting attacks on Russia as it claims to want peace. How does the Russian government or even the media reconcile that?
Yeah, I mean, it's a good question, but I think the Russians are very. They just look at the strategy of this. For this. This isn't even a war for them. It's a special military operation. If it was a war, I don't think there'd be much left of Kiev.
Right.
But if you go to Kiev, you'll have to be taken around to show any damage. You won't even know there's a war on. So this is a military operation to force Ukraine into neutrality, and unfortunately, NATO is arming them, and as you say, helping them direct strikes that is killing Russian people. Absolutely. Russia has its support, though. I think they get weapons from North Korea, possibly from Iran. So they have their help as well. But I think the Russians look at it strategically. That with this new President Trump, there's a better chance for peace. Doesn't look like it's going to happen. But ultimately, they live in the world. So when this war is done, they're going to have to they will want to have good relations with Russia and Europe. There's still a lot of trading going on between Russia and Europe. Russian and US astronauts still work together. A friend was telling me, who just came over from Europe, he was staying in a hotel, and there's a bunch of NASA American scientists sitting at the table. Yeah, absolutely. Because NASA and the Russian Roscosmos, they work together. They do work together. So the war isn't stopping them working together. So it'd be amazing. That wouldn't happen in the Second World War with Germany and Britain, for example, would it? But this war, it's a proxy war. So there's still things going on. I think that there's even Russia still exports some stuff to Russia. There's still some Western companies trading in Russia. So if there's peace tomorrow, there can be good relations very quickly with any country in Russia that wants it, or any country in Europe or America who wants there to be good relations. The Russians will say, okay, done, we've got what we want, let's do business, let's trade. And against Russian people, there's no animosity to Westerners, really. I mean, if you're an American, if you came to Moscow tomorrow, you'd be very welcome here. People were very curious. They'd be like, wow, I'm American, why are you here? Oh, fantastic, oh, that's nice. You're very welcome to. I mean, some Russian soldiers might be absolutely fine, but, there's probably some more anger there. Yeah. Because, they may have had comrades killed, etc. And as you say, the Americans are helping them fire the rockets. The Russian people, generally, there's no animosity to people in the West, really.
I'm curious, did you have difficulty with the language when you first got there? I mean, you effectively have immigrated there at this point. Are you?
Well, I don't know. Immigrated, but
oh, immigrated is too strong. Okay, fair enough.
But you live there. Maybe I can go back then. But when I went, I knew no Russian, but I worked with a translator. I had a translator in Donbass who, Anya, a wonderful woman. She's in peacetime. She's a translator at Donetsk University. So the first thing you do as a correspondent or journalist somewhere who don't speak the language, I had to just ask around for any translators. Someone gave me her contact, and then we worked together very closely for a year. We're still in touch and friends.
Oh, I see. That makes sense.
So she's a very tough woman. She has a 2-year-old daughter, translator. She speaks about 5 languages, but then effectively been with me for a year on the front lines, whenever. And she's much braver than me, actually. But my Russian is slowly improving, yeah.
I want to play a clip for you, and I want to get your take on it, but I have to ask, what was it like being on the front lines? There's another gentleman, Patrick Lancaster, who's on YouTube, who is, some of those videos are kind of funny when you're watching it because it's out of context. Like, in context, there's an attack coming. You're running to try to get away from the attack, and you're reporting as you're running to try to get away from the attack. Out of context, you're looking at it, and it looks kind of comical as he's, dodging away, and he's clearly not in military shape, but he's doing the job, right? What is it like being on the front lines as attacks are coming in? That's astonishing to me.
Yeah, I mean, well, it's different every time. I mean, on the front. So, so Donetsk it's a big city, and the front lines are on the edges. So you're kind of in the center of city and it's normal civilization. So you're at a hotel and there's a waiter, and you're having breakfast and it's civilized. And you go out to a base which is sort of hidden in the city somewhere.
Yeah.
And then you meet up with the soldiers, and they'll drive you out, and suddenly you get to the last checkpoint, and then all the civilian cars disappear, and it's just you and the soldiers are on the road, maybe just in a car or a minivan, and it's just empty, just you on the road. Then you get to the front lines, the front base camp, and different things happening there, and head out on foot to front. And sometimes it's really quiet, sometimes there's nothing happening at all, and it's just chill out, relax. And other times it's quite heavy, so a lot of gunfire and incoming artillery a lot. And especially when one side fires artillery, the other side will reply to hit that position. So you have to hit the ground a lot. Once I was interviewing a Russian soldier in the front line trenches, kind of like a dugout place above the ground, and then bullets started coming in. I mean, I was interviewing him, and it went quite viral, the piece, and he said, World War III is coming. It doesn't feel like it now, but this is the start of World War III. It was got a dramatic interview. And then the bullets come, and they're so close to that, you hear the whizzing sound. Yeah. And then our position got hit by a rocket-propelled grenade. And the soldiers look after you, though. The soldiers down, down, down. You run into a little bunker. Because the soldiers, there's a duty to look after you, no matter what nationality you are. So the soldiers really look after you. But yeah, it's always different at the front line. I mean, I know people have been killed in this war, journalists and Russian journalists. was killed, I don't know, about 6 months ago in Donetsk by a drone. Anything can happen at any moment. I mean, all this
When
crazy stuff happens.
when artillery comes in, what is that like? And I'm sorry I'm asking these questions. I'm asking because I don't know. And so they may seem simple or silly because you're there and that's been in your experience. I've never experienced artillery fire. So I don't know what it's
Yeah.
like, which is the reason why I'm asking the questions.
Artillery is awful.
Yeah.
It's horrendous. So, I mean, I'll give you one example. I was trying to take a Sunday off, so I went out to my favorite cafe in Donetsk, and because the center of the city gets shelled, not all the time, far from it, but often on Sundays. I figured out it was the most dangerous day because a Russian soldier on the front told me that basically Russia would bombard 3 days, but Ukraine would bombard for 3 days, and then Sunday everyone would take the day off, both sides. And so Sunday, I kind of pieced it together. That's probably why Sunday was the most dangerous day in Donetsk, when the Ukrainians would just say, screw it, and just fire artillery into the center against civilians. And so I was sitting at a cafe, and no military targets anywhere near the center of Donetsk, no military targets. And sort of sitting there, and there's some, young girls at the waiters, at the coffee shops, some guys playing cards. And suddenly everything just shakes. The building shakes, the glasses smash. Landed all over my computer as I was watching football. I was watching English football, trying to relax, and the windows smash in here, and everyone runs down to the basement. Everything shakes, and it's just boom, 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 boom. And I run down to the basement. Everyone's like nervous, and you can wait for it to stop, and then I have to go out to film, because it's my job, right? So, and you take a deep breath because you go out to film and you just hope there's no dead, because it's about 6, 7, 8 missiles land all at the same time, pretty much all around the market where I was. And you're going out to film, and that was like that for many months when I was there. So you'd hug the wall, so you knew the artillery was coming from that area, and so you'd walk on the left side of the street, so at least you'd have some protection from the building. This is when you just went to the shops. Missiles landed outside my local supermarket. 2 of my apartments were hit. Missiles landed right outside. Some days you're in your apartment, just inside the door, almost in the toilet, just to get extra protection if it hits. So artillery is the worst. I know everyone in Donetsk would leave their front doors open for the apartment building, so you could just run in.
Wait, did you say they would leave their doors open so people can run in just in case artillery was being fired?
Yeah, so a lot of high-rise apartment blocks in Donetsk, like any big cities. So all the front doors, the apartment door buildings would be left open, so you could just run in. I had to do that sometimes. And it'd just be, for a few days there'd be no bombing in the center. So you kind of think, oh, that's all right. Some days I'd go down to the reservoir and listen to sport if I was trying to relax and have a drink or whatever. Some days it'd be quite relaxing, and suddenly they just happen, the bombs. And so I'd be walking along to the shop in a sort of parky area. A guy would be walking towards me, and artillery lands, probably quite far off, but it's so loud. We both hit the ground. Get up again and sort of smile to each other and walk off, or run into buildings when you hear the shouting. So artillery is terrifying. It's artillery, the sound of it, the smashing. Anybody can be hit at any moment. It's best just to hit the ground, lie flat when it lands, because it's not the missile that kills you generally. Although a woman was decapitated near my house just while out shopping by the missile itself, but it's not the missile that kills you; it's the shrapnel. So when it hits, the shrapnel bursts out. So you're best to hit the ground and just stay on the ground, rather than run, actually, most of the time. But yeah, I mean, it's living under a city under shelling, and at the front line, I mean, when you're really in it, I mean, it's hellish artillery. I hate artillery.
Wow, that is mind blowing. I mean, and I guess you're right. People can get used to some of anything. Especially if you don't have a choice to live under it.
Yeah. Well, some people get used to it or go mad.
Or that. Wow,
yeah.
man.
But that's why I really favor the soldiers of the front line. Really tough people. To live under that, really tough people, and a lot of people, who don't want to be there. Mainly Ukrainian. and you think, to die like that. So people talk about the children and the civilians all the time, but apart from the children, it's the soldiers I care for most. It's because they're tough people, and that's a lot what this parade tomorrow is about. And I think there's going to be some soldiers who are currently fighting the war there as well, and people paying respect to them. I think that's what a lot of tomorrow in Moscow will be about.
Your experiences have been amazing. And I would tell you, when I was at the radio station, I had hoped they'd send me to Donbass because I wanted to cover it up front, to see it. Like, meaning, and I know that's hard to explain. And I know my mom is like, oh my God, because she knows I've said this before. It's one thing to report it from a distance. It's another thing to experience it where you have a visceral understanding of what's happening in a particular area. Those are two very different things. And you've been able to see it up front. Thankfully, you have not been injured, killed, or hurt in those experiences. But man, I can't imagine what that's like. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I try to focus on writing kind of human stories and things, because I think, that's what I enjoy doing. And, most people can analyze the politics and the situation from afar. You don't need to go anymore, but particularly telling stories from the front line, and you do find out important information as well. But it's actually the reason I haven't been back to Donbass for a year, because it's different. It's not really the story in Donetsk anymore, and also I just don't want to die towards the end of the war.
There's that too. Nobody wants to be the last man to die, right, in the losing war. I want to play this clip by J.D. Vance, and I want to get your take on it. And because there's this talk about a peace deal, and in the United States, they've been complaining, but the Russians is not accepting Donald Trump's nonsense, ludicrous peace deal. And it's almost as if they don't fully get that from the Russian point of view. A, this is existential. B, we're not doing a Minsk 3. C, we want to solve this kind of security architecture issue of Europe in totality, not this, nonsense deal that Donald Trump is coming up with, that he's like, I may walk away. They don't get it. And I want to play this clip. This is J.D. Vance, who is a more competent version of Donald Trump, talking about it.
I wouldn't say that the Russians are uninterested in bringing the thing to a resolution. What I would say is right now, the Russians are asking for a certain set of requirements, a certain set of concessions in order to end the conflict. We think they're asking for too much.
Now, I think that J.D. Vance is out of his mind. It is a rational thing to say, look, we will take a ceasefire, but we don't want you putting in weapons, intelligence. We don't want them to continue to build up another military. We don't want Europe sending in weapons. We don't want Germany sending in weapons. Meaning, if you indeed are going to do a ceasefire, then it should be a ceasefire where they stop rearming. That is not asking for too much. Like, the American position in this is very weird. Give me your take on this.
Really understands the war, or the new administration doesn't. I don't think the last one did either. And they don't realize what this war is. They don't understand the Russian mentality or culture or history or why they are fighting this war. They don't. So when Vance says the Russians are asking for too much, it just shows a lack of understanding of what Russia's aims are and the situation on the ground. Mm-hmm. Essentially, Russia is asking for Ukraine not to be a threat to it in the future, not to be a threat to these new regions. That's essentially, I think, the most important point. And you have these European countries who essentially will want to do a deal, to make peace, but then to train up Ukrainian soldiers and maybe start the war again in a year's time or 5 years' time. That I think will be Russia's main fear. and they won't want that to happen. And I think the Russian military establishment will not want this to happen. They want to make sure that any peace agreement is the end of the war for our lifetimes and hopefully forever. That is because otherwise Russia will just have to fight it at a later date. So that's essentially what Russia is asking for. And the thing is that Russia has the ability to carry on this war until they achieve those aims. They're winning the war. Russian economy is stable. They have plenty of volunteer soldiers. So ultimately, they feel they can just carry on, grind. Now Russia's relied on volunteer soldiers. People who signed up, hundreds of thousands of Russians for good pay. There is good pay. That's important, but also for duty. Even kind of all your friends are going, you'll go. So they rely on motivated volunteers, whereas Ukraine is rounding people up on the streets, and now threatening to go after teenagers. So you see where this war is going. You see where it's heading. So Russia can stay on this path. That's one of the reasons you're not seeing huge Russian advances. The Russians can lose a lot of soldiers advancing. The Ukraine have got NATO behind them, a lot of mines, a lot of, so they don't want to. Russia doesn't want to waste a lot of soldiers trying to launch these major attacks. Better just to grind Ukraine down, let them go through their population, and ultimately get what they want in the long term. And that's what Russia will do. So I think the Americans just don't really understand the reality on the ground.
See, I don't know if they don't understand the reality. They don't care. And I don't even know the American mentality in the light of this, especially for US presidents, is they don't want to look weak. And acknowledging or accepting what is effectively a capitulation offer by the Russians, basically, you lost the war, you don't get to dictate terms, is heavy for an American president to accept. There was reporting that Donald Trump didn't just want to walk away and say, okay, this is Joe Biden's war, I'm done, because he didn't want to be blamed for losing the war. And it's like, but he acknowledges that they've lost the war. I mean, Donald Trump has put out that Ukraine is going to, Russia is going to take all of Ukraine in 2 or 3 years. And so Ukraine needs to come to a deal. Okay, well, you've acknowledged it's a proxy war, and you're acknowledging that Russia is going to take the entirety of Ukraine in 2 or 3 years. You're acknowledging you lost the war. And yet, they still can't bring themselves to accept reasonable terms we want to stop this for the long term, not a temporary ceasefire. It's just wild to me. I agree with you. They just, they don't seem to get it. What time is it? So last question before I let you go. Is there anything that has surprised you being in Russia for the time frame that you've been there?
Anything that surprised me?
Yeah. But anything that has stood out? Like I've noticed when I've traveled to locations that there is people are the same everywhere you go, but they're like these cultural differences sometimes that you notice depending upon where you are. I'm just curious. I've never been to Russia.
I've been to Russia a few times before, but anything that surprised me, I don't know.
Or that stood out, or that piqued your interest, like something.
Donetsk is a very beautiful city. I like Donetsk, which is where the war is. Nice city. Obviously, Moscow, St. Petersburg are great places.
Mm-hmm.
I went to Siberia. Siberia is very interesting, like Baikal.
Have you?
Crimea is very beautiful. I really like Crimea. Very beautiful place. I don't know. War is war. I've covered a few other wars, so nothing really surprises me too much there.
Wow. Would you say war is war? Pretty much anywhere you go where there's a war, the mechanics of it are very similar.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same, very similar things, just different on their mise en scène, different, weapons used, and but there's a lot of uniqueness to this war as well. But yeah, I don't know. Moscow's summer's about to start. Very beautiful. There's a fantastic summer here. There was
One more
hardly any
question.
snow this winter. Almost no snow in Moscow this winter, and everyone's shocked. Everyone's thinking climate change must be real.
Really? I remember I was in Poland, this was years ago. It was like negative 20 degrees below zero. And the cab driver was like, yeah, it's not as cold this year. And they were attributing, and I'm like, what? Like, I'm in America, right? Like, the temperature for me is like just bone chilling cold. Like you couldn't get away from it. And his thing was like, yeah, it used to be much worse. It used to be like negative 40.
Yeah.
This year wasn't that bad. And his thing was the temperature seems to be changing. So I guess it is. One last question. When you talk to the soldiers, what do they say? I mean, I would imagine they're motivated. I'd imagine they want this to be over with, but they want to complete it. Well, maybe I'm getting this wrong. Like, is there a consistent theme that comes up when you're talking to the soldiers?
No, not really. I mean, I was mainly in Donetsk with Donbass soldiers and so very sort of Russian nationalist soldiers and Donbass soldiers. So Donbass soldiers, their families are getting, bombarded, etc. So they're very much fighting for their city, for their
Right.
Land. And the Russian nationalists are there to, some soldiers are. A lot of soldiers are very hugely politically educated. You could have some of these soldiers on your show, and they'd be as politically educated as you and other, and I remember talking to one soldier who was down in a trench with the bombs landing, and he was cooking. We've got a fat soldier, and he was cooking. Very friendly, nice guy. And I said to him, "What do you think of all this?" And he said, "Well, there's a lot of greed in the world. A lot of people trying to make money, all the rest of it, and I'm just here trying to stop that coming into my motherland." And he said, "I don't really understand it. I think he basically did understand it, but just said it in a very simple way. But people fight for different reasons. You'll get a lot of soldiers who are there because the money is very good, and because they just sort of doing their duty. Yeah, I'll join the Russian army. I'll do my duty, make money. I can say that I did my job during the war. Maybe I can. Lots of different people, different reasons. But but also it's tough because soldiers have been there for a long time. Not necessarily, probably not getting as much holiday as they would like, and it is really tough there. So that's also why Russia will want to end the war. They will want to end the war. If Trump could have made a deal, they'd be very happy to make a deal. They want the war ended as soon as possible, but it has to effectively be on their terms.
Yeah, it has to be a good deal. Johnny, this has been an illuminating conversation. We have a really good crowd here today. I'm fascinated by this conversation. Just the frontline experience and being able to articulate what it's like being under artillery, under attacks on civilian infrastructure. The things and the conversations with the soldiers, like your personal experiences are fascinating. They just really are. Thank you for this. I really
Thank you
do
so
appreciate
much,
it.
Jamal. Always great to speak to you.
And please be safe. I mean, to the degree that you can. I mean, you're pretty much in a war zone, but please be safe. Johnny Miller,
Hopefully tomorrow's safe. Yeah.
British journalist based in Moscow, spending much of the Ukraine war based and covering from Donbass. Thank you for this, man. You have a good one. Enjoy victory.
Same to you, Jamal.
Bye-bye. That is a fascinating